يد كتلة قولو حيرو ودلتيو ما صرتو عم قابي شوتوسي توكوسي وأوعيتا ووثي مقوايو أسيريا تيفي مقوايو وقولكو يميديا.
Hello, my name is Joseph Pirayou. I want to welcome you to this portion of In the Beginning Ashur program. As always, if you have any questions, this is a live program. If you have any questions, any comments, you want to send us live, if I can answer it, I will do my best. If not, we normally do a Q&A and answer all those questions. Today's program initially was about Dr. Vigram's book, The Assyrians and Their Neighbors. I don't know how many people know about this book. Dr. Vigram, as some of you might know him, he has authored a few books about our people. One of the books is The History of the Assyrian Church, The Cradle of Mankind. The other book, The Monophysite Separation, and of course, the last one I've read from it so many times, Our Smallest Ally. It's a booklet. And this one, The Assyrians and Their Neighbors, Dr. Vigram has written it. And after we did the flyer, we posted, and I'm going over some notes, what to read from this book, which is great. I mean, I will get back to this. It's talking about the starts from Mesopotamia, goes to the Parthian period, then the Sassanid kings, then the Abbasid Caliphate and Seljuk, Mongol rule, Tamerlane, Ottoman Turk, then talks about some of our customs, and then talks about the Great War and what happens after. The book was published in 1929, and that's what got to me. I said, wait a minute. 1929, he's writing a book about the Assyrians and their neighbors. 1929. Who at that time knew who the Assyrians were? The Ashuri, right? It just hit me. I said, wait a minute. I'm guaranteeing you that he's not writing the book to make millions, like people that writing books, self-biography. They want to sell books so they become rich. I don't think that was the intention of Dr. Vigram. But when I was thinking, what hit me was, how did he get to that point? I don't know how many of you are familiar. Back in early 1900s, this is 1929. Dr. Vigram was sent to what they call at that time, since it was part of Ottoman Empire, the Mesopotamia, especially to the region of Hekari Mountains, where the 5 tribes that we have known, they lived there. And he was sent to the patriarch of the Church of the East. At that time, that's what it was called. It wasn't the Assyrian Church of the East. And he sends him he's sent there by whom? By Bishop of Canterbury. Now, if you know the system of United Kingdom, they have a head, the king or queen. They are the symbol of the nation. Both are head of the nation and head of church. But in reality, in practicality, the prime minister is head of the nation. He or she does the laws and rules and wars, and whatever decisions are made by them. And Archbishop of Canterbury is the head, actual practical head of the church, that tells people what to do, what not to do. And that person sent Dr. Vigram to come to our people in the Hikari Mountains, mostly to the Church of the East. But why? How did Archbishop knew about our people? I was like thinking about, we sometimes we take things for granted. Oh, there is a book about the Assyrians by Dr. Vigram, 1929. That's interesting. Let's see what he had. Where did he get his information? Why even he bothers to let people know about who the Assyrians are? Why should even people care, right? Well, I remembered this book. I talked about this book a while back. I don't think I sent a copy to. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'll show you the torn up copy. So it's called God's Graves and Scholars. So in this book, I believe there is that German. He himself is a archaeologist, I guess, and he comes up with this book, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 parts, and each part has its own civilization. Like in part 1, he writes about Pompeii, Troy, Crete. The second part, he writes about the empires of Egypt, the civilization. In part 4, he writes about empires of Aztecs, Mayas, and Toltecs, Aztecs, Southern America. But in the part 3, it says called the Book of the Towers, Kingdoms of Assyria, Babylonia, Sumeria. And he wants and the name of the book is The Story of Archaeology. And the archaeology that is done throughout the world. That's why he has from Mayans, Egyptians, Troy, and us. History of archaeology includes us. Not that we are surprised, but the thing is that how it came to be. So there is this gentleman, his name is Paul Emile Botha. I'm going to be reading a little bit about him. Do you have his photo? I think he was born 1802, 1870, 68 years of life. So I'm going to read some of the stuff that this author of this book has written before getting to Botha. But while I'm reading this, maybe we can see where this whole idea of Assyrians and their neighbors, the importance back in 1929 came to be. So the title of this chapter in this part that is talking about the Assyrian Ashur civilization or the towers is called Botha Finds Nineveh. But before talking about Botha, is giving us some, let me just read. So it says the Bible tells of God's chastisement of the Jews. And I have crossed that word Jews, it's Israelites, but that's another story. Chastisement of the Jews by the Assyrians, which are called the rod of mine anger, of the Tower of Babel and the splendor of Nineveh, of the 70-year captivity, great Nebuchadnezzar, God's judgment upon the whore of Babylon, and the chalice of wrath, God's wrath to be poured by 7 angels over the lands along the Euphrates. The prophets Isaiah and Jeremiah pour forth their terrifying visions of the destruction to come upon the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees, excellency that shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah, so that wild beasts of the isles shall cry in their desolate houses and dragons in their pleasant palaces. And it's saying that these are like from chapters of Isaiah from 13 to 19, 22. Of course, the other parts from the Revelation of Jesus Christ, the last book of the Bible. During the centuries of Christian faith, this is interesting writing here. It says, during the centuries of Christian faith, the word of the Bible was unassailable and the letter was sacred. So for a long time, nobody questioned Bible. Nobody was like, oh, it's so sacred. It's just the word of God. Then criticism came with the enlightenment of the 18th century. So 1700s, it saw people criticizing the Bible, the stories don't match, the dates, there is a discrepancy, says something here, something there. So 18th century, it was criticism that came by enlightenment of the people. Then it says, yet the 19th century, when the criticism inherent in all the materialist philosophies hardened into permanent doubt, simultaneously brought forth evidence for the historical truths so plentifully embedded in the Bible, overlaid though it was by much subsequent embroidery. And I had to check the word embroidery, what it means. It's like being when you have silk or some to put additional, cover it with shapes and designs. Anyway, I had to check for myself. Most probably you guys know what embroidery means. Anyway, he's talking about the land. He says flat was the land between the Euphrates and Tigris rivers, but here and there mysterious mounds rose out of the plain. Dust storms swirled about these areas, piling the black earth into steep dunes, which grew steadily for 100 years, only to be dispersed in the course of another 5. The Bedouins who rested by these mounds, letting their camels graze on the meager fodder growing at the base, had no idea what they might contain. I mean, for centuries, these guys with their camels are going on these mountains, no, they don't care. Just give us some food, find somewhere a well, we get water and live. They didn't care about anything. It says believers in Allah and in Muhammad, his prophet, they knew nothing of the biblical passages describing their land. A question was needed, a powerful intimation to set in motion the solution of the mound's layered secrets. This and an attack by an energetic Westerner who knew how to make bold use of pick and shovel. The man who was destined to drive the first spade into the ground was born in France in 1803. Here it says 1802. Until he was past 30, he had not the slightest intimation of the task that was to be his life's work, for it was at that age that he, then a physician, returned from an Egyptian expedition. At his arrival in Cairo, he had a number of boxes among his luggage, and he goes on to say that when he goes back to his country 14 years later, this physician and entomologist published a 5-volume work on Assyria that proved no less significant a stimulus to the scientific study of Mesopotamia than the 24-volume description the L'Egypte had been for Egyptology. Then it goes on, talks about this another person, his name is Messenger, that 100 years later, he comes up with a book entitled Konige, Babylons and Assyrians, which means kings of Babylon and Assyria. The importance of this book, this is an interesting part. Sorry, I'm reading from the book, might be a little boring for you, but this is great stuff. I don't know how many of you know about this book, Gods, Graves, and Scholars, the history of archaeology. We are in it. We are in it. The importance of this work, the guy that he put the list of the kings of Babylon and Assyria, says that the importance of this book lies least of all in its contribution to scholarship, but it was not intended as such. Its aims was merely to report for the general reader on rulers who flourished 2,000 to 5,000 years ago. The real significance of this book and of all books like it by scholars of other countries for our story of the development of archaeology lies in the fact that it could be written at all and in a popular form at that. For to cite the introduction, such a presentation requires historical data that will contribute rich color to the image of those great men and women so that they will come alive for us. They write the list of the kings. Just one person doing something, some digging, it exploded. And this guy who came up with the list, he's talking about the work of this gentleman, Bota. It says, not much more than a century ago, the history of Assyria was a sealed book. And only a few decades ago, the Babylonian and Assyrian kings were hardly more than names to us. Can it be possible, so short a time afterwards, to recount the 2,000 years of Mesopotamian history, including real character studies of the kings? One person, this guy, Emir. Maybe he didn't know what he started, where it's going to get to, but that's what has happened. This book about the list of the kings of Assyria and Babylonia, among other books, proved that this had become possible in our century. This would be 19th century, 18th century. They found the place. 100 years later, they're coming with a lot more information. So it shows that in a matter of a few decades, a number of obsessed excavators, scholars, and amateurs were able to lift an entire culture to the light. That's why Dr. Wigram wrote about us serious. How did he know about us? What happened here? When I was reading, it was like, we never look at it this way. I don't. I was like, wait a minute, we just take things for granted. You go to Louvre, I mean, not everybody does, but there are photos of all these statues, the writings, British Museum, Louvre, here, there. Oh, yeah, beautiful. Yeah, story, great. It says it was the work of these people. They were able to lift an entire culture to the light. Our people. Keeps on going about this writer who did what he did. So it says what emerged from all this hard work was one of the archaeology's greatest triumphs, if only because the land of mounds showed no visible traces of past greatness. See, when you go to Egypt, you see the pyramids, you see the Sphinx, something's going on in there. You go to Mayans, South America, Mexico, there are traces of things that are happening in there. You go to Italy, I mean, there are so many places that this guy is writing about that there are evidence. Then you go dig more and find more. Not in our land. When these people, they were just, flat areas, little mounds here and there. So when it's talking about, like, it says, when you're looking at these Bedouins and these people that are living there, and they like, you look at them, and the author is saying that Assyrians are their ancestors, which he doesn't know at that time what had happened to us. But it says that when you look at these people living here, they have no idea what great empire was under their feet, had existed. See, this goes on and talks about something even more important that I want to talk about, but it says about the local legends. They had outside these mounds, they were scattered over the dusty plain. They had little, what they call it, these tablets, they find them, and they describe them as if birds had been walking over wet sand. All they had here was some writings from the Bible, from book of, what was that, prophet, belly of the fish, Jonah, kings named Ashur, Tiglath-Pileser, Nebuchadnezzar. That's all they had. It's amazing. It says in the Old Testament, the region between the Tigris and the Euphrates was called simply Aram Naharaim, in Syria land between the two rivers, this being the Hebraic equivalent for the Greek Mesopotamia. Here were located the famous cities on which the God of the Bible visited his mighty rat. Here in Nineveh and Babylon reigned terrible kings who had other gods besides him and therefore had to be expunged from the face of the earth. It's kind of BS, but we'll go with what is right. Today it is called Iraq, and Baghdad is its capital. To the north, the area is bounded by Turkey. On the west by French-mandated Syria. So we can see this is like early 1900s that he's talking about. And Transjordan on the south by Saudi Arabia, and to the east by Persia, or in Iran, the modern usage. The two rivers called the Tigris and Euphrates, which made the land a cradle of culture, even as the Nile gave life to Egypt. It arises in Turkey, then flow from the northwest to the southeast, come together a short distance above present-day Basra. This was not so in ancient times, and it empties in the Persian Gulf. Assyria, the old land of Ashur, stretched out in the north along the rapidly flowing Tigris. Babylonia, the ancient Sumerian Akkad, spread out in the south between the Euphrates and Tigris, gives us the location of these. And then after these findings, it says that the Encyclopedia of General Information in 1867, under the heading Mesopotamia, the following entry is found. The land reached its peak under the Assyrian and Babylonian rule. It reached its peak. Under the rule of Arabs, it became a position of caliphate and again bloomed, but not to that level. But with the Seljuk, Tartar, and Turks incursions, it began to decline, and at present is in part an uninhabited desert. How? By the hands of these Seljuks, Tartars, and Turks. Out of the deserts of Mesopotamia rise mysterious mounds, flat topped with steep, often eroded slopes, cracked open like the dried sheep milk cheese of the Bedouins. These curious mounds kindled the imagination of inquiring spirits to such a degree that it was in Mesopotamia that archaeology as an excavational art celebrated its initial triumph. Archaeology history starts from there. As a young man, Paul Emile Botta had already made a trip around the world. In 1830, he entered the service of disposition, goes to Egypt. 1833, French government makes him consul in Alexandria. Then 1840, he was appointed consular agent in Mosul, Nineveh, Upper Tigris. And it talks about him doing his, it gets hot, walks around, talks to people. And he's like, something's going on here. And there's so much here. I just don't want to bore you with just the reading. And for a whole year, he just finally somebody tells him, listen, there is this place. And he says, and the writer is saying, like, these Arabs, they like to talk, they like to show off. But what happens is that when he sends that person to check it out, finds the palace of Sargon in Khosrabat. And more information, it says, when he sent his people to check it out, Botta was eventually to be immortalized, having his name in the history of archaeology. And it says, Botta is still remembered as the first to disclose the remains of a culture that had flowered for almost 2,000 years, and for more than 2,000 years, 2.5, had slumbered under the black earth between the two rivers, forgotten by men. Then he's talking about his trips. He found out after discovering that, he says, this is with Nineveh, at least parts of it, says Botta no longer doubted that he had discovered, if not all of Nineveh, certainly one of the most splendid palaces of the Assyrian kings. The moment came when, no longer able to keep this conviction to himself, he sent the news to Paris and so out into the world. I believe he wrote with pride, and the newspapers made headlines of it. I believe that I am the first to discover sculptures that can be truly identified with the period when Nineveh was at its height. Discovery of the first Assyrian palace was not only a newspaper sensation, Egypt had always been thought of as the cradle of civilization. For nowhere else could the history of mankind be traced back so far. Hitherto, only the Bible had anything pertinent to say about the land between the two rivers, and for 19th century science, the Bible was a collection of legends. The sparse evidence found in the ancient writers was taken more seriously than the biblical sources. The facts offered by these early writers were not entirely unbelievable, yet often they contradicted one another and could not be made to agree with biblical dates. Both, thank you, Rania, appreciate for the comment. I know when I first read it, it was very interesting for me too. It says both finds in consequence amounted to a demonstration that a culture as old as the Egyptian or even older had once flourished in Mesopotamia. Older if one cared to give credence to Bible accounts. It had risen in might and splendor only to sink under fire and soared into oblivion. Now, this is the part I really liked when I was reading it. It says, France was fired by Botha's revelations. Aid was mobilized on the most generous scale. They send them, all this help because this is good stuff. Now, it says Botha dug there for 3 years, from 1843 to 86. He fought the climate, sickness, the opposition of the natives, the interference of the Pasha, the Turkish governor of the country. And it says this greedy official could think of only one explanation for Botha's tireless excavation. He says the Frenchman must be looking for gold. That would be the thought. That's why it says France and the rest of Europe, it goes, what they call it, is on fire, because they're thinking different. It's not all about money. It's not all about what I have in my pocket. It's about, they say that they thought Egypt was the cradle of civilization. Now they find that our ancestors. But who cares? Well, in Europe, people cared. That's why they had the Age of Enlightenment. Who are we? Why are we on Earth? What is this life about? How should we live this life? That's what the thinking was. They were not thinking like the Pashas. Oh, the guys are digging. They want gold. No, they want knowledge, who we are. That's what made difference. The Egypt civilization, a lot of things that humankind had learned, but when our culture came and it was older, and they could see it older because of what was written in the Bible. I try to make it shorter, get over this part. And they found this place, they found this palace. So he's writing about this palace. The palace was laid bare, rising up from mighty terraces. Archaeologists who had rushed to the site on reading Botha's original report of his find recognized the structure as the palace of King Sargon, the one mentioned in the prophecies of Isaiah. It was in fact a summer palace that had stood on the outskirts of Nineveh, a sort of Versailles. It was built in 709 BC. When we went to Paris, we didn't get a chance to go to Versailles because it was a little bit far, but that's where the summer palace, I guess, for the French kings. So this palace that they found of King Sargon, they're comparing it to that Versailles palace in Paris. And it says the number of sculptures and reliefs was staggering. Here's another quote here. At one swoop, the mysterious Assyrian people were lifted out of the abyss of the past. Here were their reliefs, their household implements, their weapons. Here they could be visualized in domestic, round, at war, on the hunt. It was just not a name. It became real. Even now with the 3D things that they're doing, they can do so many things. If they were back there, if somebody wants to do it, they can do so many amazing things about, our people. So they had a problem with the sculptures because when they were taking them out, they would break. So they bring this specialist from France to make sure everything is either preserved or they packed. They put a load on the boat. They send it through Tigris. It's not protected properly. Everything's down there. Then they do another one, another load, and they finally are able to get it all the way from Tigris to the Persian Gulf. And from there is a big ship, ocean size going vessel. And he says that it was loaded, and in due course, the first Assyrian carvings arrived on European shores. A few months later, they were on exhibition in the Louvre. This is 1840s. Then he says he continued. Oh, this is another interesting part. He says Botha himself continued to work on a large frieze until eventually a commission of 9 archaeologists took the task off his hands. One member of the commission was Bernov, soon to be known as one of the most important French archaeologists. A quarter of a century later, he became Heinrich Schliemann's oft-cited learned friend. Another was a young Englishman named Austin Layard, whose later fame was to eclipse Botha's. Most of us, we have heard of Rawlinson, Layard, and in this book they are mentioned also. But first, Botha is mentioned. It says here, yet Botha ought not to be forgotten. He was a trail baker in Assyria, as Belzoni was in Egypt. Like Belzoni, he was a furious digger, a determined seeker after booty for the Louvre. The role of collector in Nineveh, corresponding to one played by Mariette in Cairo, was filled by another French consul, Victor Place. Botha's account of Nineveh, the book is called Monuments de Nineveh de Cortes. I'm just reading it. I don't know what it says. Et décrit par Botha, Mesures dessines par Flandin, is numbered among the classics of archaeological literature. The first 2 of his 5 volumes contain plates of architectural and sculptural subjects. The third and fourth, the collection inscription, and the 5th, the description. Mr. Paul Emil Botha. One person. I'm not saying that these mounds wouldn't be found, but how interesting is that this person, it took him 1 year. He was in the area. Finally, after 1 year, his works pays off. I don't want the program to be too long, but I want to give us a perspective. This is 1800s, 1840s, 1850s to, let's say, end of the century. So 1840, 50 till like 1900. Let's see what the rest of the world was going through during that time. So I picked a few. There's so many things, but picked a few things that I thought it was interesting. So in the 1840s, in United Kingdom and Ireland, they started building the railway. It was called the Railway Frenzy. The country of New Zealand was founded 1840s. Anesthesia used for the first time. This is for you, Dr. Karoken. Anesthesia was used for first time in 1840s. The Baha'i faith was founded. I don't know how many of you are familiar. Baha'u'llah was this person that came out of the Islam religion and claimed to be God. But this is when, the faith was founded back in 1840s. There is an event, it's called the Great Disappointment. There was some guy claimed that Jesus will be coming at a certain time in October or September, or whatever it was, and Jesus didn't show up. So the whole, became so famous that it's mentioned as one of the events of the 1840s, the Great Disappointment. Then we have the first publicly funded telegraph line. They had these telegraphs. Now, what is a telegraph? We have internet and Wi-Fi and all these things. And it connected Baltimore to Washington, D.C. Texas became the 28th state. Mormons migrated to Utah. The Oregon Treaty gave Oregon, Washington State, Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana to U.S. Gold Rush, 1840s. We have a football team, so not American football team, it's called 49ers. These are the gold diggers that came in 1848. After 1 year, they found gold. The Gold Rush starts in 1840s. The Communist Manifesto was published. There is a war called Crimean War from 1853 to 1856. This is when France and Britain, they defend the Ottoman Empire and defeat Russia. Years later, they have to fight the same Ottoman together after Russia stopped fighting them. Our people. I just found out from 1845 to 1895 in Harput, this is in Turkey, we had, back then there was a big Armenian population and some are people living there. The massacres start. Some go to US and some move to Tur-Abdin, and the families, this is during the time these people are excavating. Where is Turkey? You go south towards the Hakkari Mountains and you go further south, that's where the Nineveh and the areas. So not far from there are people being massacred. 1840s saw the Beth-Nahrin was a Kurd, Turk, whatever. They killed our people in the Hakkari Mountains. So I'm trying to put the perspective. All these people are digging our history, bringing in light who we are. That Dr. Vigram comes and writes 5 books, one of them being the Assyrians and their neighbors. One person making a difference. This gives me hope. But the thing is that sharing it. One person, as I said, one of us can make a big difference at wherever we are, keeping our language, keeping our name, wherever we are. I'm not ashamed. History. People writing. They brought the Bible into life, as this other author was saying. Look at that. We are who we are. But the thing is that we are special. Not because I say so. Because when I read the book, that according to this guy, that they said Bible was so enlightened that they said criticism is not right, this and that, they found Ashur. When they found Ashur, people of Ashur found out who they were. We have all this information. Now we're thinking, we want our land. Some are, some aren't. But before we get to that part, preserving, protecting, sharing our heritage, who we are. Proud, not in a way of I'm proud, the pride that, blinds you. It's a pride that is enlightenment, the world, the first civilization, the cradle of civilization. We are who we are. Let's just share that, our name, our identity, and we have a future coming. When, I don't know. But until then, thanks for watching. Thanks for the comment. And in the name of the Creator that says, blessed be Ashur, the work of his hand. Amen. Mabqila, thank you, and we'll see you later.
Sheikhani.